Welcome to True Brand Gamer. Today, we step into Crimson Desert, a world of mercenaries, fractured alliances, and battles that shape destiny. Few games in recent memory have carried the weight of ambition quite like Crimson Desert. Developed by Pearl Abyss, this sprawling open-world action RPG steps beyond the studio's roots and into something more personal, more cinematic, and far more tragic. What unfolds across its vast landscapes is not just a tale of war, but meditation on loyalty, leadership, and the slow corrosion of idealism in a world ruled by steel and blood. The story unfolds across the continent of Pywel, a land fractured by political opportunism and ceaseless warfare, where noble houses posture about honor while quietly starving their own provinces, and mercenary companies like the Grey Manes serve as both instruments of survival and collateral damage. Pywel isn't simply a backdrop. It breathes, it suffers, it reacts. Snow buries mountain passes where entire battalions disappear without a trace. Golden plains shimmer under the weight of cavalry charges, and coastal strongholds brace against cannon fire as the sea roars with indifference. Everywhere you turn, the world feels mid-collapse, as though history itself is cracking along fault lines too deep to mend. At the center of this chaos stands Kliff, captain of the Grey Manes. He isn't a chosen one, nor a legendary knight wrapped in prophecy, but rather a battle-worn leader who understands that survival often demands compromise. His armor carries dents from past sieges. His voice carries the fatigue of command. Kliff's defining trait isn't raw power, it's responsibility. He commands Unka, a towering warrior whose immense strength contrasts with his quiet loyalty. Jan, ever perceptive and skeptical, constantly challenges Kliff's decisions, and a host of other mercenaries who rely on their captain not just for strategy, but for stability in a world that offers none. Their bond isn't forged in glory, it's forged in mud, fire, and shared hunger. The inciting incident seems straightforward at first, a contract to secure a regional stronghold, but nothing in Pywel remains simple for long. The Grey Manes are drawn into a layered political conflict involving the Demonist Kingdom and rival factions vying for control of dwindling resources. What begins as a paid assignment mutates into a catalyst for continental upheaval. Betrayals surface, allegiances shift, and information proves more dangerous than any blade. Kliff gradually realizes that he and his men aren't merely participants in war, they're leverage. And that realization reshapes everything. What makes the narrative compelling isn't just scale, but consequence. Every decision ripples outward. Aid a struggling village, and you might earn loyalty, but you also paint a target on its walls. Support one noble claimant over another, and you stabilize a region temporarily, while destabilizing 3 others. The game leans into this moral grayness with confidence. There are no pristine victories, no clean resolutions, only outcomes that must be lived with. Kliff's internal conflict grows alongside the external war. He begins to question whether leadership is about protection, power, or sacrifice, and whether he can realistically offer all 3. Gameplay reinforces this thematic tension with remarkable cohesion. Combat is fast and physical, yet grounded. Kliff doesn't float across battlefields like an untouchable demigod, but slams into enemies with weight and momentum. He grapples, counters, vaults, and chains together strikes in fluid combinations. Physics-driven interactions mean that terrain and positioning matter as much as reflexes. A duel in a cramped alley demands precision and timing. A siege atop collapsing battlements demands adaptability and spatial awareness. And when cavalry crashes across open plains under a storm-darkened sky, the spectacle feels earned rather than scripted. Yet Crimson Desert refuses to define itself purely through combat. Exploration is expansive and tactile. Kliff rides across rolling grasslands, scales jagged cliffs, and dives into ancient ruins half swallowed by earth and time. Weather systems aren't cosmetic, they transform encounters. A sandstorm can obscure an advancing enemy force. Torrential rain turns stable footing into treacherous sludge. Settlements evolve based on political outcomes. Trade routes shift, camps relocate, and rumors spread. The world doesn't wait patiently for the player. It moves, reacts, and occasionally punishes hesitation. Between conflicts, quieter moments provide necessary contrast. Around the Greymane's campfire, tensions surface, doubts are voiced, and loyalties are tested. These sequences humanize the company and deepen the stakes. Because war ceases to be abstract, it becomes personal. A wounded recruit questions whether coin justifies bloodshed. A veteran confesses fear of becoming nothing more than a weapon for hire. Kliff listens, responds, and reassures, or fails to reassure. Leadership is dialogue as much as it is command. As the story progresses, another layer emerges. Ancient ruins scattered across Pywel begin to hint at a forgotten civilization whose manipulation of power may have fractured the continent long before current kings began their wars. This darker, mythic thread never overwhelms the grounded political drama. Instead, it reframes it. Perhaps Pywel's instability isn't merely human greed, but inherited imbalance. Perhaps the desert was stained crimson long before Kliff ever drew his sword. These revelations widen the scope without sacrificing intimacy. The fate of nations remains tethered to the choices of one mercenary captain. Visually, the experience is striking. The proprietary engine renders sweeping vistas with meticulous detail. Sunlight cuts through morning mist. Armor accumulates grime in real time, and distant armies appear not as painted backdrops, but as living, moving forces. The soundscape amplifies immersion as steel clashes with weight and siege engines groan. Every orchestral swell shall rise and fall with narrative intensity. Together, these elements construct a world that feels cohesive rather than ornamental. Thematically, Crimson Desert interrogates the cost of endurance. Loyalty can inspire heroism, yet can also trap individuals in cycles of violence. Ambition can unify fractured lands, yet can corrupt absolutely. Kliff's arc becomes less about triumph and more about definition. What kind of leader will he be when stripped of illusion? Does he align with emergent authority in hopes of imposing order? Or does he reject centralized power entirely, risking chaos in pursuit of autonomy? The final act forces these questions into confrontation, not just blade against blade, but ideology against ideology. By the time the dust settles, after sieges have fallen silent and alliances lie in ruins, Crimson Desert reveals its true identity. It isn't merely a showcase of scale or a playground of physics-driven combat. It's a meditation on responsibility in an unforgiving world. It asks whether survival justifies compromise, whether unity is achievable without domination, and whether loyalty can withstand the gravitational pull of power. And in following Kliff and the Greymanes through mud, fire, and betrayal, players aren't simply conquering a continent. They're navigating the fragile space between obligation and desire, where every choice leaves a mark that no storm can fully erase.